The data tables tool in Excel is a great tool which allows you to run sensitivities on a model in the background live. So just to give you an explanation here, what we've got is a very simple spreadsheet. How much we're spending on a house, how long we've got to repay it in months, the interest rate, and then the calculations that are working out what is going to be our monthly repayment, and over that full period, the 240 months, how much interest do we pay. Now what we're worried about is interest rates. Currently we've modeled it at 10%, but what happens if it's 8% and 9%, etc. So manually I could go and type in there 8% and see what the numbers are, maybe copy and paste them, then try 9%, etc. But Excel can do that all for you. You'll see you just need to set it up in the correct way. So what we've got here is we've got a column of inputs. So you'll see it says 8%, 9%, 10%, etc. It's a bit pedantic, so you have to set it up exactly the way it likes it. So we've got 5 inputs, but we can do more if we want. Above this column and to the right, I need to now go equals, and I'm going to equals it to the monthly repayment. And then over here I can go and add another one. I'm going to equals it to the total interest paid over the period. So what I've now got is that's given me the per month, that's given me the total interest. What you now need to do is you need to highlight this table, and it must include the outputs at the top and the column inputs on the left. So you must highlight that whole area. If we now go data, what if analysis, data table, what Excel is now asking is, have you given it a row of inputs or a column of inputs? So you can see we've given it a column of inputs. What Excel needs to know is this column that you've given it, where must it put it? Because Excel is going to take that 8%, put it in one of the cells you tell it, look at that answer, write it there, look at that answer, write it there. Take the 9%, put it in one of the cells, see what the answer is, write it there. So you can see that this is interest rate. I'm going to go point over here. When I run it and I say OK, you'll see it instantly creates a whole bunch of numbers. So at 8% it's saying that the monthly repayment will be 9,200. Let's just check. I'm going to put 8% there. You'll see 9,200. Total interest 1.1 million, 1.1 million. So what Excel has done is it's gone, taken this number, put it in there, copied the numbers here. But what's important about this is that it's live. What that means is any change I make to these inputs or these inputs affects these cells. Now if you were following along and these didn't change, we'll explain why that happens later. But just to show you that, so let's say actually the house we're looking at is 1.5 million. Notice that when I click enter, watch what happens to these numbers. They all automatically change. If I change that back to 1.1 million, and now I've decided that these interest rates are too small a gap, I want 2% gaps. I'm going to go here, and if I type 10%, notice what happens, the numbers change. 12%, 14%, 16%. So effectively what Excel has done has created 5 versions of this model, and so it knows what the answers are if this was 8%, if it's 10%, if it's 12%, etc. And because you've switched on to be live, any changes you make to the model, either on these inputs or these inputs, will be reflected in here. So let's just go back to our original inputs. Just quickly to explain what I mentioned earlier, if your numbers do not change here, and just to explain what's happening. Effectively, when you do this in Excel, even though you've got one model, Excel has created 5. So let's say this was a very big model, and if I change this number, it takes a second to calculate. What effectively will happen, it will then take 5 seconds to calculate, because it runs that one, and then all of these. So there's a setting under formulas, calculation options, where you can decide how it must calculate. Must it be automatic, which means that every time you touch it, it calculates. So in our previous example, Doesn't matter what you do, whether you bold something or insert a line, it'll do this calculation, and you'll have to wait 5 seconds while it's doing all of those. You can then choose automatic except for data tables. If I choose that option, when I make a change, let's make that 1.5 million now, you'll see although this changes, the data table doesn't change. And that's because it's waiting for you. You've now told it, except for these data tables, be automatic. If you push your F9 key though, you'll see it now updates it. The third calculation option is manual, in which case nothing changes. So if you're going to use data tables, to see how it works now, I would put it back to automatic. But when you're using it on your models, especially if they're slightly bigger, rather use automatic except for data tables, because it can become a bit frustrating where every time you touch everything, you have to wait while the data table calculates itself. Let's just go back to our original number. Another constraint about data tables is, unfortunately, this all has to be on the same sheet. So the input cell, the output cell, and the data table need to be on the same sheet. Now the way you can achieve that is, even if you want it to be on some other sheet, wherever the inputs are, you can make these resultant repayments. They don't have to be the calculation. You can say equals, and it can be a cell on another sheet. So all that it has to be able to see is the input and where it must look for the answer on the same sheet, so you can run that table.